Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's great to have you here at the Wilson Center. My name is Andrew Redmond. I'm the director of the Mexico Institute, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all this morning for a conversation with Salomón Chertorivski, candidate for Jefe de Gobierno of Mexico City for the Movimiento Ciudadano. Salomón, as many of you know, is a distinguished and accomplished public servant who has focused during his career on social policy, poverty reduction, and health. He is currently a diputado en licencia on leave from the Mexican Congress, where he represented the Movimiento Ciudadano. Before that, from 2012 to 2017, he served as Secretary of Economic Development for Mexico City. He was previously National Commissioner for Social Protection in Health, which made him responsible for leading Seguro Popular from December of 2009 to September of 2011, and then he became Secretary of Health under President Calderón. He had previously been Director General of DICONSA and coordinated the social policy team for the governor of Michoacán. Salomón has taught at CIDE ITAM and the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City. He has a master's in economy from ITAM and a master's in public policy from Harvard. So this morning, Salomón will deliver a brief presentation, talk to us a little bit about Mexico City and his thoughts about governing one of course, the most important cities in the world, let alone in Mexico. And then we'll have a conversation and invite questions from the audience. So again, thank you all for being here. And with that, we're going to shift the presentation. Do you have the remote? It's over there. Yeah, it's just going to take them a second to switch the screen. I think it's going to take a second to switch the screen.
Hello. Andrew, thank you very much for receiving me here at the Wilson Center. Duncan, Lila, and now I know Ambassador Roberta is here as a fellow. It's great to be here. To tell you the truth, I've been in and out from the Wilson Center all around my public career. I believe, Duncan, that I have come here almost in all of my public spaces. I was here at Commissioner of Seguro Popular. I was here at Ministry of Health. I was here when I was in Mexico City. I was here in seminars when I was a congressman. I was here in political campaigns discussing. I was here with former Governor Lázaro Cárdenas. I've been here in and out. So I really feel always very welcome, and I'm always in touch with Andrew and with Lila. Now, my daughter was an intern here a year ago, I believe. So I feel very familiar with the Wilson Center. It's a pleasure to be here. I was thinking this morning, and what should I concentrate on? So I put a presentation just to guide some aspects of the conversations that I want to put into the table. But mainly, for me, it's important, why should a thinking center, a tank should receive someone that wants to govern a city? The first thing I have to say is Mexico City, yes, it's called Mexico City, but it's a govern. It's a state. Since 2016, Mexico City has its own constitution, something that Washington, D.C. cannot say until today, but probably someday. But we're a state, and not only that, it's one of the largest states in Mexico. It is kind of a situation like in Tokyo, Japan, for example, which is much more than a city. It's really represents a big, and not only that, today more than ever, and I'm going to talk about it, cities represent a central piece in diplomacy. Subnational governments are every day more important on the international arena, and sometimes cities may be much more agile in terms of doing and delivering things when discussions have to take place at the international level. Every day there are more forums for cities to discuss, for cities to get into agreements, and many times cities are crucial to help national governments to get into terms and conditions of better diplomacy and better agreements. So I truly believe learning, knowing Mexico City a little bit more, knowing the possibilities of Mexico City in our bilateral agenda, and understanding why it's interesting that a candidate for governing Mexico City may be part of this bilateral agenda. It's something that I would want like to. So first of all, about Mexico City, just for some of you that may not know much about Mexico City, I just want to put a little bit into perspective what Mexico City is about. And I'm in love of Mexico City, so why is relevant on an international level, and I was already telling you, anticipating a little bit of it. I'm going to talk because Andrew and Duncan know I'm a nerd. My passion is public policy. I wanted to be all my life. My profession, it's being a public servant. That's what I wanted to be. I worked for more than 20 years with different governments. I really didn't care about political parties and about politics. I was into doing good public administration, to doing good evidence-based public policy, implementing good public policy. I was really deep into evaluation. But 5 years ago, because mainly, and today afternoon at Georgetown, I'm gonna get deeper into my personal decisions and life. I decided that what I was seeing in some of the first decisions that the federal government in Mexico City with Andrés Manuel López Obrador took were clearly against what I thought things have to be in a democracy and in public policy. So I decided to be very frontal, very respectful, but very frontal in terms of what we were not doing correctly. For example, destroying Seguro Popular, and I mean, which was one of the things that I invest most of my professional life in, and without any evidence, it was destroyed from one day to another. Yes, it had many things that should have been corrected, but destroying one thing without understanding everything that was deeply inside it, for me, it was a shock, and it was part of my decision in going into politics, completely into politics, and trying to fight with arguments, with evidence, a different possibility for Mexico. The second thing is that I decided, after knowing all the political parties in Mexico, I decided with which political party I wanted to be part of, and that was Movimiento Ciudadano, the only political party in Mexico which is social democratic party. As any party, it still needs to grow, and to continue establishing its agenda. But until now, Movimiento Ciudadano is looking for a different aspect of what Mexico can be, and in my case, what Mexico City can be. Well, I'm going to talk about the challenges and opportunities, specifically in Mexico City, and briefly at the end, I'm going to just want to set a statement on the democratic fabric at stake and what we are living in Mexico and why we have to defend our electoral institutions and our democracy. About Mexico City. Mexico City is a huge economy. I mean, it's not only 15% of the Mexican economy, but if Mexico City would be a country, the economy of Mexico City is the size of Peru or Colombia. Mexico City is the 6th largest economy in Latin America. These 5 years have been terrible for the Mexico City economy. I have to say that we haven't grown, we haven't created employment over the last years. When I run the economy of Mexico City, we grew on average 3% a year. In the last 5 years, we have only grown 0.7% every year. But Mexico City is still a huge economy. We are still receiving one of each 3 foreign investment that comes to the country. Even with the nearshoring, Mexico City is still receiving the dollars. Most of the companies in the country, the headquarters are established in Mexico City. 53% of the 500 most important businesses are in Mexico City. More than 70,000 professionals graduate every year, half of them engineers, in Mexico City. We import a lot. We are ranked one of the best places to live in the world. There are more than 160 theaters. You can always see a new musical play, a drama play in Mexico City. We have more than 100 museums. The second place in the country, it's held by Nuevo León, which has only 45 museums. The city hosts the most important international sport, cultural events, etc. It's a fantastic metropolitan, huge city. Again, our relevance in the world, Mexico City is the 2nd largest city in Latin America after Sao Paulo, and is the biggest capital in America by far. It's a city just below Tokyo, Shanghai, etc. We are one of the richest cities in the world. We rank in the top 50 cities in richness. And Mexico City acknowledges the significance of local government. Today we have this data of President López Obrador and former chief of the government of Mexico City, Claudia Sheinbaum, in which they believe the international diplomacy and the internationalization of cities and of countries is not important. But Mexico City has an international motivation level. We signed the Paris Agreement. We are part of the 40 resilient cities. We have MOUs for economic cooperation signed with LA, with Chicago, with Paris, with Montreal. We have a very active relation in terms of diplomacy. And for example, in the year 2026, not only we're going to host together the World Cup, but probably NAFTA is going to be renegotiated. Let's see what happens. If that happens, local governments had a huge role to play in those discussions. Because sometimes local governments are much more embedded in the relationship, in the economic relationship and the economic importance than even at the national level. So having strategic partners for important things as Mexico City is crucial in the years to come. Again, the city faces enormous challenges. And probably in the conversation we'll get deeper into that, but I don't wanna leave, as I was saying, I'm a nerd. I just present this new book. I wrote this book with 12 things that I believe are the greatest challenges today in Mexico City. I do a thorough diagnosis, and then I stretch the solution, the map, a route of what has to be done in at any stage. I talk about, for example, probably the most important crisis that we're going to live on the next couple of months, which is the water scarcity. Yes, it's climate change, but it's also what we didn't do over the last decades in Mexico City in order to have a solution for our water consumption. So I have a big plan on what has to be done in terms of water. Mexico City, although it's not comparable with Guerrero or with Tamaulipas in terms of security, still in Mexico City, 8 out of every 10 women do not feel safe when they are alone in the streets. Parents, we don't feel, 7 out of every 10 parents, we don't feel safe if our daughters or sons are in the streets. So I have a chapter on what to do in terms of peace and security, mobility, as in any big metropolitan area. Today I run into a huge rush here in Washington, D.C. It was difficult to move around Washington yesterday and today for me, and it is not such a big city as it is Mexico City, but I have what we have to do in terms of mobility. I talk about economic growth and equality in Mexico City, what can be done to have a better economy and a more equal economy. I talk about affordable renewable energy, waste management, air pollution, etc. And I talk about women, how women in Mexico can feel safer and can have better opportunities to develop. But we can get into all these details. Opportunities in the bilateral agenda and why Mexico City may be important in our relationship, and future seminars probably here at the Wilson Center when I govern Mexico City. Mexico City hasn't received as much investment from the nearshoring opportunities as many other cities. And of course, Mexico City cannot have a gigafactory of Tesla. We don't even have space for that. But we can have the headquarters, the technicians, all the computing needed for, all the design needed for those companies. That it should be hosted in Mexico City because we have the human capital, because we have the city in which executives want to live, because we have a lot of graduate students, as I was telling you. We have, and we need to talk in the agenda about migration. I mean, it's not only a national discussion or a national problem. First of all, we have to understand migration today. It's much more complex than it was many decades ago. Mexico, it's not only a country that sends migrants to the United States. Today, we are a country that keeps on sending, but we are also a transit. We are also a country that is receiving a lot of migrants. We are receiving a lot of refugees. And all of those migration expressions on its different natures are expressed in Mexico City. We are having and we are living a migration moment that we have to understand, and that has to be addressed multilaterally. And cities, because migration are occurring at the city level, at the state level, at the local government level, we need to be part of the discussions. So we can talk a little bit more about it, but I just want to set it on the agenda. There are other things very interesting happening in Mexico City. We have more digital nomads than ever in history in Mexico City. You go to a couple of neighborhoods in Mexico City. I don't know if you know Condesa, Roma, Juarez, and they ask you for your TOEFL if you want to get into a restaurant. I mean, everybody in Mexico now speaks a different language than Spanish in those neighborhoods. And for me, that's fantastic. That's something incredible. That's internationalization. But it comes with certain problems that you need to have a proper public policy. It's with taxing, it has to do with gentrification, it has to do with even with between migration and the digital nomads, which are completely, the Haitians that are living in Mexico City and the Norwegians and Germans that are living in Mexico City have very different possibilities, but both are creating some xenophobic emotions in Mexico City, and we have to address them. We have to address them with all the possibilities and all the opportunities that they represent, but also understanding the challenges and what do we have to do. Mexico City is a digital hub, and we are still going to receive more and more youth that want to work there, but we want to do it right. So we have to turn these challenges into opportunities, and I would love to speak more about it. Nearshoring, digital nomads, etc. Mexico City can be better, and we need a solid foundation of democracy to achieve it. And I want to be very clear at this. What we have been living over the last couple of years is polarization, is cancellation of plural dialogue. At the Mexico City level, there's a replication of each and every one of the presidential slogans. Mexico City, which since its first election with Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas in 1997, was a piece of the equilibrium of Mexico, because it had always been an opposition government from the federal level, and that was very healthy for our democracy, because the second most important political figure in the country, which is the chief of the government of Mexico City, if it's not always on agreement with the federal government, it creates a better equilibrium. in many things, it was a relationship in which left Mexico City to be the focal point in new discussions in Mexico, in civil rights, minimum wage, and the discussion for increasing the minimum wage started in Mexico City. Many things that at the federal level cannot be discussed can be discussed in Mexico City. But what had happened over the last 5 years is that the government of Mexico City not only mimeticized to the federal government, but it became again a department of the federal government. Instead of an autonomy government, it was another cabinet member. And that is very sad in terms of democracy and has to be at least acknowledged. And we have to resist towards authoritarianism in the greatest battle we have to fight over these days. The 2024 election for Mexico, as it is for the US, it's also about democracy. It's about democratic institutions, and it's about what we can construct over the future. I love my city, and it saddens me to see how opportunities to make it even more wonderful are disappearing. This is why I want to govern my city, because I know it deserves to be better. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Salomon. That was a great overview. I was remiss. I apologize. I should have mentioned the Atlantic Council is partnering with us on this event. Their logo was up earlier, and on a series that we're doing as we try to make sure that we're able here in Washington to bring as many policymakers and candidates to town as possible to have the kinds of conversations and hear the presentation that we just heard this morning. Salomon, in terms of you being a nerd or a policy wonk, there are lots of topics that we could take on, and I want to make sure that the audience has a chance to pose some questions as well. I guess I'm going to ask you a couple, and then we'll open it up. The one that you and I have probably spoken most often about is health, and Mexico City, I think, has been at the forefront in some ways in delivering public health services. And, the Médico en tu Casa, or I guess now it's Salud en tu Casa program, was fairly innovative in the way it was developed. So, and how it's perhaps delivered. So maybe you could talk about what has worked and what else needs to happen in terms of delivering health services in Mexico City. Should be on.
yes. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, let me take health into a broader area. We're living a health crisis in Mexico. Again, three tsunamis together. The first one was destroying the Seguro Popular without any evidence and without anything planned and studied to substitute the Seguro Popular. And let me tell you a little bit. I mean, probably since the 80s, and I would say with every person that was on the leadership of the health system in Mexico, Guillermo Soberón, Jesus Cumate, Juan Ramón de la Fuente, Julio Frenk. I mean, Mexico had a continuity of incrementally having the possibility of delivering health services to the population. I have to say it was never perfect, but every year we were better. With Julio Frenk and Seguro Popular, we make probably the most important step over that time, because there was in law a specific mechanisms in which you were delivering financial help in which you have all the financial part correct for delivering help for all the population that did not have social security because of the labor status. Seguro Popular used to have affiliate 53 million people. And yes, Seguro Popular has a lot of things to be corrected. No? A lot of, some governors, for example, took money from Seguro Popular. Some governors are today in jail because of taking money of Seguro Popular. Was it Seguro Popular the reason of corruption? No, the reason of corruption is because they are corrupt. I mean, if the federal government would have sent more money in other areas than in health, these thefts would have stole that money as they stole money from health. The problem was corruption itself, not Seguro Popular, but still, well. Seguro Popular it's probably the public policy that has had the most research evaluation in the history of Mexico. We have more than 1,000 papers published on journals by peer review, in which we knew what was working and should have continued, what needed to be changed, and what clearly needed to be disappear. But none of that evidence was taken into consideration. They destroy it. Well, in Mexico, we have a saying that my grandma used to say that cuidado con tirar el agua sucia a la bañera con todo y el niño. And that is what we did with Seguro Popular. And we replaced Seguro Popular with nothing. First it was the INSABI, the Institution of Health for the Wellness, and today it's going back to the so-called IMSS Bienestar, which is also going to be a failure because it represents the same mistakes that the INSABI had, and nothing was changed. With a huge problems on trying to centralize the services, that bad or good, 40 years ago, Mexico decided, almost 50 years ago, Mexico decided to decentralize the health systems. So the states were the ones that learned how to provide services. And that was the case of Mexico City. Mexico City has the largest facilities in the country, has the largest number of physicians and nurses in the country. The National Institutes of Health are in Mexico City. Mexico City had a very robust system, but again, because Mexico City, it's not autonomous or independent from the federal government anymore, Mexico City gave out its health services to the federal government. And that was a huge mistake. That's the first tsunami. The second tsunami that we have to acknowledge, and you are an expert on the pharmaceutical area, is that, again, without any evidence, the federal government destroyed the system of planning, buying, and distributing drugs and medical devices. Again, without anything. It was an office at IMSS with more than 500 professional public servants that they knew how to do the demand and the supply studies from 1 year before, which are very complicated, and I don't get deep into it. But again, there's corruption. And I mean, if there, well, I'm not going to get into that, but instead of that huge office with a huge expertise, they decide to translate to a small office on the Treasury Department, to 4 people that had never before buy anything. Don't talk about the complexity of drugs, and it was a failure. Again, public policy without evidence. And the third thing was the third tsunami was the pandemic. I mean, the COVID pandemic got us when you were disappearing the Seguro Popular, when you didn't have a robust system for planning and buying drugs and medical devices and supplies. So we were one of the countries in which more people died because of COVID and negligence. Mexico City, and I have a chapter in my book of talking about health, and talking about what happened during COVID. Mexico City is the city in the world that for 100,000 inhabitants had the largest number of people dead in the world. Again, so those 3 things combined get us into a very difficult situation, and we have to reinforce health systems in Mexico City. Almost happily is not from scratch,
Right.
but we have to get independence from the federal government and start again.
Your comments about corruption remind me of the expression of the story about why a bank robber robbed banks, and he said, because that's where the money is, right? So, so to your point, that people who are corrupt will be corrupt regardless of what the money that comes in is for. You talked a little bit about nearshoring and Mexico City's potential to attract corporate headquarters and maybe not build factories, but do you have any thoughts on what the city could do other than being the fact that it is what it is? What else can you do if you were the Jefe de Gobierno to, I guess, to make Mexico City more widely recognized as a destination for investment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, investment does not come by itself. You have to procure it. You have to travel. You have to engage people. You have to look for the type of investment that you want to come to the city. You want to bring businesses that are going to exponentially increase the Mexico City economy. And for that, you have to go and look for it. And then you have to create the proper incentives in terms for those businesses to really want to get established, because you are competing with many other cities around the world. We are competing with Miami and with Dallas and with Houston and with Los Angeles. So we need to offer things. And many times it's not fiscal incentives. On my experience, what you have to offer is that doing business is easy. Giving them information and giving them the proper treatment for them to feel that they are well received. And that is having an office taking care of that. And it's really, I would say it's really very simple if you do it properly. It's start traveling and getting investment. I mean, again, I did it. See.
Well, I could keep asking questions, but I'll see if anybody in the audience wants to pose. Ambassador Lejeune, Samantha's gonna bring you a microphone. If you could introduce yourselves when you ask the question, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Roberta Lajou. I have to thank the Wilson Center for the opportunity to meet you in person, Salomón. I had always followed you, and your prestige comes before you, but it's better to hear you in person.
Thank you very much.
I have two questions. One is about water. I live in the western part of the city, and for the first time, we are experiencing shortages. I know for a fact that the eastern part of the city has experienced it for a long time, and now, even in the hotel areas, we are experiencing shortages of water. What are you going to do? Because the water resources are not in the city. And second, what is someone as prestigious as you are running on a very short platform as Movimiento Ciudadano in Mexico City? And I hope to see you one day run for president.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. I really appreciate your comment. Yeah. First, water. As I was saying, it's a decades problem. No, it is not sexy for someone that is governing, putting so much money that it's needed in something that you are not going to see. No, water is underground, yeah, and it needs a lot of investment. But let me try to explain, and I'll try to be. Mexico City has actually just two main sources of water. 30% of the water that we consume in Mexico City comes from Michoacán and the state of Mexico, from a system called Cutzamala. It's superficial water that we move from 400 kilometers, and we have to inject it because we are a very high city, a city with more than 2,000 meters above the sea level. It's a huge city to get water from. We don't have any other superficial source around Mexico City. There are no big rivers. Rio de la Magdalena is very small. We don't have big rivers around Mexico City. The other 70% of the source is the underground water, which the underground water in Mexico City used to be one of the largest in the world. We were lakes. Mexico City was built under a system of lakes. So there was a lot of water. But the problem is that we take out twice as much water than what we re-inject to the underground. On that, if that continues, in 50 years, the aquifer, it's going to be finished. 50 years. That's the statistics. Now, but what can we do? Let me be very precise, or try to be very precise. First of all, it is very expensive, very costly to bring water and to extract water. And when we do so, 40% of all water that gets into the system gets lost, because we haven't invested on the whole water and sewage system for years. There are places, even near the hotel areas, and in which if you excavate, the place in which the tube used to go doesn't exist anymore. The water runs through the mud. So imagine that in terms of losing water, but not only that, in an earthquake area, what that represents in terms of ground, it's terrible. So the first thing, it's fuga cero. We need to invest, and it's not from one day to another. We need at least invest between 8 and 10,000, $100 million a year in fuga cero. And with that, in around 8 years, we are in capabilities of having that. But there are areas in which you have to invest first, and with that, you start holding most of the water. But it's a long-term solution. But fuga cero, it's crucial. Second, most 60% of all the water that has to be reinjected to the underground comes from the south part of Mexico, in which we have all our forest. Sometimes we don't think about Mexico City as a city in which more than half of its territory it's natural reserve. But we have overexploited that reserve with urban areas, with agricultural areas, so we have to invest a lot on reforesting all the south part of Mexico, because that is our main source of re-injecting water into the underground. Secondly, today we have technologies in which we can get rainwater into the system. Third, we need to have treatment plants and potabilization plants, at least one at each one of the 16 cities or alcaldías and municipalities in Mexico. Fourth, we need to change completely our culture through water. The per capita consumption in Mexico, it's huge. The billing system is destroyed, and we have really to recreate a new culture towards water. Water is a human right, but it is a human right for drinking, for your food, and for your hygiene. But it's not a human right to be cleaning your street with water, or cleaning your car with water. So we need another culture in terms of water. Immediately, Ambassador, in the next couple of months, we're going to live the worst crisis of water scarcity that we have lived in our history. The Cutzamala system, it's at its lowest levels ever. And yes, that's climate change, but it's also what we have done with the mountains around Michoacán and Estado de Mexico, which are the mountains that fill the wealth. Because some of these mountains have been, there have been fires. In other mountains in which you have pine trees, which are the most important trees in order to capture water, the organized crime have changed those pine trees for avocados, which is all the contrary. So on the next couple of weeks, what we have to do, it's declare the emergency and rethink immediately our consumption of water. There's nothing else we can do on the next couple of months but reducing consciously our consumption of water. sorry to make it, but that is probably the largest problem and the largest sustainability problem if we want Mexico City to live the next. The second one, I feel right at Movimiento Ciudadano. Yes, we are the underdog, but there's a possibility. I mean, these things do not end until they end. We have seen around the world that many small parties turn around elections. What had happened in Guatemala just recently, what happened with Boric in Chile, what happened with Milei in Argentina, and I'm not talking about the person.
You're not cloning your dog.
But what I'm changing my hair. No. But the phenomenons on elections can be there. What I have to do, Ambassador, in the next 3 months? Two very important things. One, 50% of the Mexico City population had less than 32 years of age. And they don't want to vote. They don't feel they like Morena, and they hate the PRI. They hate it. So they need an alternative. If we are capable of delivering that alternative, there we have a possibility. If we get the youth enthusiastic to go to vote, there's a huge possibility, and we are the only ones that can do that. Second, there is a big part of people that feel okay with Morena, that voted for Morena, that cheer for Morena, that are thankful, for example, because they are receiving a social program, which is good. Minimum wage has gone up. They feel okay, but Morena has disillusioned them. But they are never going back to PRI or PAN. Never. And in my numbers, that is around, in Mexico City, around 34% of the Morena voters. They have to see an alternative. And in order for that, we have to create the alternative. So I hope in 3 months, I'm going to be able to create an alternative for the youth and an alternative for those people in Morena that do not feel there. And if that happens, because I'm going to be the runner-up and I'm going to win. That may happen. I'm going to win. But if that doesn't happen, if there's a miracle and I don't win the government of Mexico City, I'm hoping to do a campaign of causes to talk about the problems and the possible solutions, and to really make a campaign not of adjectives, but of proposals. And I hope that type of campaign may also set an agenda which is clearly needed in Mexico City.
Thank you. Heidi, I think I saw your hand.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. My name's Heidi Smith. I'm a professor of public policy at Iberoamericana. Y estás invitadísimo para presentar ahí también.
Ya voy a la Ibero.
Sí, sí, ya sé.
Thank you.
La pregunta que tengo, the question I have is, I was going to ask about your constituency, and I think you just told us who your constituency is because of the highly divided city that we have in Mexico City, which was very evident in the last electoral maps, right? So my second question is, you say that you're a technocrat, and you say you're an expert in public policy, and I'm curious about two things. One is there really gentrification happening in Mexico City? Because in the maps that I've seen, it's one of the most heterogeneous cities that we have. And then second, is it xenophobia or is it nativism that's happening with these foreigners moving in? And so that's a different way of viewing this onslaught of individuals. And if that is the case, that it is just xenophobia, that we can incorporate more people and think about the culture. But if it is nativism, then are you combating nativism with this para-diplomacy agenda that you're proposing?
Thank you, Professor. It's very interesting. The first thing I have to say, today Mexico City is not highly divided. That is something that we have this idea because what happened on 2021 election showed a divided city, but today it's not a divided city. Conditions have changed dramatically. And what happened during the 2021 election, it is not repeatable. And let me try to explain first. We were just going out from the pandemic, economically, and also many people in Mexico City had buried a relative. We were still very hit by the pandemic. Second, 1 month before the election, the Línea 12 of the subway broke down, and 26 people died. That's 1 month before, and that was a shocking moment for Mexico City. Third, the Morena government was not that involved in social programs in 2021 as it is today. Today, 61% of all homes in Mexico City receive a social cash transfer from the government. 6 out of 10. That didn't happen and the economy has recovered. Lastly, in 2021, if you see the proportion of people voting, it was an overwhelming majority of the population that went to vote of the high-level economic and people on the medium range, Iztapalapa, did not went out to vote. That is not happening again. Not in a presidential election, not in it was a midterm election. So in my numbers is not such a divide society as the president wants us to believe and as the media wants us to believe. Or at least they believe it, no? I mean, and with many of the people that I have lunch, dinner, breakfast, they believe we are very divided. The numbers do not show the city is very divided. So conditions, as the professor, are going to be extremely different, and that's why my constituency has to be, needs to be different, no? I'm not fighting the opposition as it is. I'm fighting to show that a better Mexico City is possible. I don't know if I explain it. It's very interesting. I agree with you. We don't have a gentrification problem as it is, or because of the digital nomads. We have a huge housing problem, which is completely different. But when you need to find someone pa culpar,
To blame.
it's easier to blame people that speak another language and that are living in Condesa and Roma. But the huge problem is that since the early 2000s, we haven't constructed enough housing in Mexico City. That is a huge problem. So today houses are very expensive, and we have sent most of the youth to the far periphery of the metropolitan area. So Mexico City is a city in which we, let me say it this way, we have dinner around 9 million people, but we have lunch at least 15 million people every day. And those 6 million people come in and out from very far away places. And that's a huge problem. So, and for many people it's contradictory, and it's, we need to build housing. We need to do it without corruption, with services, with good planning, but there are huge areas in Mexico City that had to go vertically, that are central areas, and we need to have people living near where they work. And that's not happening for at least half of the Mexican city population. So more than a gentrification problem, we have a housing problem. And one is going to be resolved with the other. That's my belief, and that would be my bet. You make me think on the other question. I don't know, really. I had both expressions in my conversations on the day-to-day, going to the neighborhoods, and when I'm in Gustavo Amadero and there's a huge Haitian community living near the bus station. There's a Venezuelan community in Tláhuac. And when I go there, people say, these people, they are thieves. And what are those expressions? I don't know. How can we shoot? But we have to study that because it's happening. So I don't have an answer, but if you could help me, that would be fantastic.
Let's see. I see. Why don't I take? I see one question way in the back, and then Diego.
Hi, good morning. Susana Macias. I'm from Mexico City. So this is a great opportunity. I mean, at the end, the citizens are the ones who are going to decide, right? So you are, like, in a sense, selling yourself, selling your proposals, right? So, I mean, I'm very, very grateful that I have the opportunity to be sitting here in front of you to ask you these questions, right? Because many people don't have that opportunity. So the only role of the government, the moral role of the government is to protect individuals' rights, to protect their lives, to protect their property, and to leave them live the lives that they want, and to make their own decisions, right? That's the only role of the government. In your presentation, I saw a lot of proposals that are intended to have a lot of government control in healthcare. And I mean, I also saw a slide that it said, like, for the gentrification, you are proposing to regulate it. I mean, I'm not sure if I read it correctly, but there was something about that. But I missed, what are you going to do in regards of security, in regards of what really matters for the government. What is the role of the government in terms of security? That's the only thing that the government should be proposing. That's the only thing that the government should be focusing. Right now, a lot of people, low-income people in Mexico, prefer to sell their stuff in the streets and to be irregular because they don't want to be tied to a government who is going to steal their money, who is going to take their money by force, right? To be used in these so-called public services that are inefficient, are not universal, and it's just making everything worse. So my question is, with this, ¿cómo se dice en inglés? El cobro de piso. El cobro de piso, a lot of people are terrified. They cannot live their lives that they want because they have on one hand the government stealing their money by taxes by force, and also they have the criminals stealing their money as well. So, and then just to finish my question, you were saying like the problem we have, housing problem, health problem. Yes, that's true. And the cause is because of the government intervention, because of all the bureaucracy that is involved, that it's not allowing people to create the business that they want. And that's why we have so many people living in Mexico. And they want to be here in the United States where they can have and build a life without all these government controls and all this bureaucracy.
Thank you very much, Susana. And I think the role of a government is dual. So probably there we're not going to be on agreement. That is why I'm a social democrat. I truly believe on the good equilibrium between individual rights and creating collective and community rights and communities. Let me tell you, I truly believe that Scandinavian countries are much better than the US. I truly believe that good governments can deliver good public goods. Nobody, it's better established to deliver, for example, public health than a government. It can be with private participation, but the rectory of a health system has to be a government. That is my belief. No. Here in the States, health, it's still not a right. It's a privilege. Here in the state, Susana, and I have worked a lot with secretaries of health in the States. When the Obama administration was trying to establish the Obamacare, and it came into place because in the States you have more than 50 million people, being the richest country in the world, you have 50 million people without health care. Yes? And you don't have to believe me, you have to go and see the stats and to see, for example,
Okay. All right.
No,
How about
okay.
Okay, Susana, why don't we continue this conversation separately?
But again, I respect your belief. I truly believe that there are areas in which government, an efficient government, it's tremendously important and is the only way in order to have more equal societies. And thankfully today, again, and I would say Scandinavia or Canada or Australia or Germany and France after the Second World War or Spain between centuries, those were better societies in which government have a good and efficient intervention. But that's a huge discussion in the world, and we can have, that is why I am a social democrat, and I believe that a good, lean, efficient government, it's tremendously important in order to have better societies, better communities, more equal societies. But that's a huge discussion, and I mean, we don't have to agree, and I agree to disagree, Susana, and I believe on that. But you ask about security, and that is a huge problem in Mexico City. I mean, Mexico City has lost its peace. I would say since the mid-90s. Since the mid-90s, the 94, 95 was a breaking point for Mexico City and for the country. It was the moment in which we were more like NAFTA was going to be signed, we are part of the OCDE, and then a presidential candidate was assassinated. A leader of a party was assassinated. Cardenal Posadas was assassinated. The stand-up of the EZLN in Chiapas that show the country that there was another reality, and that modern world wasn't really and then the economic crisis of 94, 95. So it was an emotional crisis for the country, and in Mexico City, it's the first time in which we start seeing crime rates increase tremendously. After those days in Mexico City, people start feeling insecure in the streets, and since then we haven't get it right. We have to rethink all our security systems. Mexico City has a huge police force. It's 88,000 policemen. It's huge. It's bigger than any U.S. city, but we have to organize it well. We have to train them well. We have to pay them well. We have to equip them well. And we have to change the laws in terms of what police can and cannot do, and that's possible. Second, we have technology today that was there at least a couple of years ago. With the right number of cameras, with drones, with artificial intelligence, there are huge possibilities in terms of what can you do in order to have a secure city. So I have a whole plan on what you have to do with security. Another, you mix security with informality and other types of employment and jobs in Mexico City that are also issues that we have to have in mind. But security itself, is the thing that people are more worried about in Mexico City and in the country. But yes, see, perdón.
Let's see, I thought, Diego, did you have a?
No, I'm sorry. No, I know I keep raising my hand like a crazy person. It's actually related to security, so if I can, Diego, I think you're going to go more on reassuring.
No, digital nomad.
Okay, well, economy related. In terms of security, one of the perhaps not as sexy topics that we discussed, not only on the U.S.-Mexico bilateral agenda, but more in terms of like hard security strategies, is the issue of femicide and gender-based violence in Mexico City. I'm from Mexico City, and as you said, one of your chapters is dealing with peace and how to make citizens, Mexico City residents, feel safe on the streets. And one of the big issues is 10 to 11 women are dying each day in Mexico. And I posed this question to the candidates that we've invited, to the candidates that have been here, because I do believe that in order for Mexico and Mexico City to move forward, more than 50% of its population can't be suffering, these rates of homicides and gender-based violence acts. So I'd love to see what your proposals or policies are relating to gender-based violence and how to reduce the levels of insecurity for women in Mexico City.
Gracias, Lila. Of course, it's one of the biggest issues, and the increment on feminicides and woman violence is terrible. Not only on the streets, but after the pandemic, the in-house violence and against women has increased tremendously. So there are a lot of things, and I explained it in a whole chapter. The woman chapter, it has two areas. One is reduce violence, and the other one is to creating sistema de cuidados, a child care system for Mexico City, no? But on the first part, again, we need to change the whole system. It doesn't work for women. If you need to have a whole structure in terms of having the possibility to prevent, to attend, and to give continuity of each violent case. To prevent, we need to keep on working on re-educating ourselves on the way we live together. And that is fundamental. It's the only structural thing that is going to happen on the long run. And we need to change the curricula on schools. We need to re-educate parents at their homes. We need to have a huge re-education. I would say more than education, it's a formation program of how the other half of the population has to change. On prevention also, you need to have easy mechanisms to set an alert before it's too late. You need to have people that you trust, that you know you can go with. You need to have institutions that are ready to receive any alert and act in consequences. And for that, you have to have a social services that knows how to treat in the prevention stage of a future possible violence. Second, when it happens, there you have to retrain your police force. It is incredible that you only have 7 places in which a woman that have been violated can go in order to receive the follow-up to that crime. Any police should be trained to receive that claim and start the process immediately. And the process has to be very well established. What happens with that woman? Where are you going to take her? How are you going to be in contact with her? And how are you going to do the investigation? You have to have a whole system of investigators to follow up all that system, and a whole system of people accompanying the victim through the whole process and until that woman is safe.
I think we have time for just one more question. Diego's been patient. I'm going to ask you to try to keep it brief.
Yeah, I'll be extra quick. Diego Marroquin, senior researcher at Brookings. Hola, Salomón. I want to go back to labor mobility really quick. I was having a conversation with Ambassador Roberta Jacobson the other day on the whole North American idea. I think you and I share that idea that the U.S. and Mexico are not only trade partners but are political allies, and we should be treat each other as equals. And I think USMCA and NAFTA have done a good job on facilitating the free flow of investment and trade, but we have a historical debt when it comes to the free movement of people. In that sense, I think our relation is very much asymmetrical. There are digital nomads, let's say someone from Brooklyn that wants to go into Mexico City for 3 weeks, have a really good time, or a couple of months. And it's really easy for them just to go there and work. If you look at it from the Mexicans' perspective, it's very difficult for Mexicans to come to the U.S., for entrepreneurs to come for a short period of time. And that comes with its own externalities. I'm not going to say that it's a causal effect because you talked about the real estate interests as well. How would you deal with the externalities of young professionals from the U.S. coming to Mexico for work? Because, I mean, there's some issues there with rent levels raising. And then how can we better take advantage of this talent moving into the city, but at the same time still controlling its side effects? Thank you so much.
Gracias, Diego. I completely agree. I mean, we have to be better partners in terms of capabilities and equalities, and there are a lot of possibilities in terms to have agreement and cooperation agreements of those types of nomads. No, for example, we signed an agreement with Chicago when I was in charge of the economy, in terms for entrepreneurs to have the possibility to live either way, because they have a hub in which they were accepted and the visas were issued and whatever. So you can do it, but the U.S. government needs to understand that it is two ways, as you were well saying. Let me tell you that we haven't measured really the externalities, and those are very focalized in very specific things. For example, we need to have a conversation about Airbnb. I mean, I want them to pay taxes, no? For example, at least. I had the experience of being of doing the first regulation for Uber in Latin America, for Mexico City. A lot of things worked well, other things didn't. But I think we have to have a discussion on that. There's not a unique solution, but you need to regulate. On the other hand, I think for Mexico City is very enriching to house those people living in our neighborhoods. They consume, culturally, they give other perspectives. So I'm completely agree on facilitating the process on people that want to live in Mexico City, but we have to regulate it well. Again, in order to have a good environment. And for that, for me, taxation is the most important thing. Why, if you are living, paying, the government does not get its cut? Because we're paying services for as a city, we're paying services for all these people. So we need to have better agreements. But I haven't seen any good story about externalities of, if you have one, I would love to see it. No? That is a good externality for someone. Pero we used to have salsa de la que pica y la que no pica. No, it's a very interesting. If you are interested on that and researching more on that, I would be more than happy to help you with information and with the right people.
Well, I think, unfortunately, we're gonna close there. I want to again thank our partners at the Atlantic Council for collaborating with us on this. And as I mentioned, we hope to do more of these sorts of events with candidates and policymakers. Salomón, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros hoy. Thank all of you for being here. We'll post the video online in the next few days. You can share with friends or re-watch. But with that, thanks everybody for being here this morning, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Muchas gracias. Gracias.